Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's presentation, today's webinar. My name is Sebastian. I'm CTO of yWorks, and today I'm going to show you what's new in the recently released major version or versions of yFiles. In this webinar, there will be two parts. So here's a quick overview. First, I'm going to tell you about the platform-independent improvements that we have for the yFiles. So this is not just about a single platform, but for all the platforms that we support. Then there'll be a short Q&A for you. So be sure to write down your questions in the chat, and I'm going to try and answer them in that session. And then there's for those of you who are interested specifically in yFiles for HTML and the improvements that are specific to that platform only, there'll be the second part, followed by another Q&A session. So there's a soft ending in between. Please do ask the questions. If you want to leave after the independent part, that's okay for me. But be sure to check out the yFiles for HTML parts too if you're interested in the web technologies. So let's start with the platform independent features. So this applies to the new major releases of yFiles on all platforms. So momentarily, these features are only available in the just recently last week released version of yFiles for HTML 2.2, but they will be part of the upcoming releases of yFiles for Java Swing, for JavaFX, yFiles.net for the Windows Forms, and for the Windows Presentation Foundation editions of yFiles 2. So here we go. We start with some layout improvements. One of the most important layout algorithms that we have in yFiles, one of the most versatile ones, is the hierarchical layout. That style highlights the main direction of flow in a directed graph, and it places the nodes usually in a hierarchically arranged layers such that at least the majority of its edges follow the overall orientation. In this example, that would be top to bottom. We know that some of you and our existing customers had very wide layouts because of their specific flat graph structures, and hence we provided the following improvement. Strictly speaking, with that improvement, it's not a classical layered layout anymore, but we feel that the improvements in legibility are worth it. So this is what happens in the with the improvement. We, instead of resulting in a very wide layout with very small labels because of the zoomed out view, we provide the option to arrange nodes, especially for star-like substructures where each node only connects to the same root node. They will be arranged in this bus-like pattern, and then consuming less space in the resulting diagram. So the next feature is also part of the hierarchic layout improvement. It's a small one, but it's also a feature that we added in response to user feedback. So in this case, we allow for more uniformly distributing the ports along the borders of a group node. So whereas before it could happen that you get a result like this, we got the feedback from you and our users who wanted to get a more symmetric layout result. And even though this could result in a perceived waste of space, it leads to a more balanced visualization. So that's the uniform port distribution that we have now for group nodes. It's an optional feature that you can enable if you like it. The next thing is the tree layout. Tree layout is a very versatile layout. It doesn't always have to look as boring as in this visualization. So trees can consist of many different subtrees recursively, and for each stage you can try different arrangement policies or strategies. And in this case, we're using the so-called left-right placement strategy, and it can be arranged. It can be used for arranging subtrees on the left and right of a horizontal or vertical bus. But this often results in a pleasant layout. Although if there's a lot of nodes that belong to the same root node or subtree, the subtree may become very stretched, like in this example. So we added the option to actually create a more compact result where the single bus is split into a number of multiple sub-buses, resulting in a layout with a more pleasant layout aspect ratio, thus again resulting in better legibility of the labels. And the next thing is it's also a tiny improvement for one of the strategies for arranging subcomponents. This is the so-called grid node placer, where all of the child elements or subtrees are arranged in a grid, but where previously it always looked basically like in this visualization. We now have the option to arrange the center bus in a different style, so that it's either leading in front in the center or trailing at the end. Of course, this is completely independent of the placement of the root node. So the root node could also be on the left hand or on the right hand side. And this can be mixed with all the other styles that we support. Next improvement is part of the edge router. So besides the layout algorithms that also change the positions of the nodes, there are situations where the node locations are fixed and they should be changed. And for this, the edge router can be used, which only reroutes the edges, changes the bends and the port locations. So there are two major improvements in this release. One is, and the first one is integrated labeling. So if necessary, it might happen that there's a long label, like in this example, associated with an edge, and if necessary, the edge will now be routed using a different path so that it passes through areas that can actually hold the label's visualization without producing overlaps with unrelated graph elements. So this can result, like in this example, in longer edge paths, but we get guaranteed non-overlapping labels. The next improvement for the edge router is about support for bus structures again. So the result is similar to that of the pre-existing dedicated bus router algorithm that we have, but now it has become an integrated part and option of the generic edge router, and it also supports all the other features of the edge router. So what's this for? If there's typically bus structures, they are used for modeling or visualizing end-to-end connections where every item in a group is connected to every other item on the same bus. However, in this case, the algorithm does not require at all that all of them are connected to all of the other elements. You can see this that in this example, the edge that we had at the bottom over here, the blue one, connected to those over here, even though this node wasn't directly connected to all of the others. So this is declaratively, the algorithm is declaratively instructed to create a bus for all the blue, the red, and the green edges. That's it for the layout part, for the most important new features in the layout. Second part is about the analysis, graph analysis APIs that we have. yFiles, as you know, comes with a broad range of efficient implementations of various graph analysis algorithms. But until now, it was rather complicated to use those algorithms in code, and they required quite some bit of boilerplate. I'll show you that in a second. And now, to make it easier to use, we added a dedicated graph analysis API that wraps the original algorithms, and the new API can be called from the well-known iGraph interface that we have, using a common, easy to use API structure. Let's take a look at that. So before we look at the various differences, take a quick look at the the APIs that we have over here. So it's for the centrality APIs, where there's between the centrality, closeness, etc. There's a different clustering APIs, connectivity for determining connected components, bipartitions, and so on. And of course, all the path-related APIs, shortest paths, all the variants, reachability stuff, chains, and so on. Tree-related, analyzing tree structures, finding spanning trees, minimum spanning trees, calculating network flows, and many more. And the most important thing is that there's no explicit conversion between the graph that we use internally for the visualization and the one that we use for efficiently implementing the algorithms. So whereas previously, as a developer, you had to create an adapter from the original graph and then call some weird API, which every time was different for each and every algorithm. We now simplified the API and streamlined it so that there's just the construction of the API where you can pass in the options, the various options, then run the algorithms, and then process the results in the end. So as you can see, even the font size changed. So that's basically exactly the same code, but it results in a lot of reduction, clearer code, where there's now named arguments and properties, where previously there was just some magical true and false properties that you had to look up in the API. Speaking of which, the API also got a massively overhaul. We improved the documentation once again. Not only did we add new sections for the new features that we have, of course, but also the existing APIs received a lot of new code snippets. We added about 600 code snippets in this release, now totaling in more than 1,000 code snippets throughout the documentation. They are available even right from inside the API when you use the code completion and the API documentation lookup of the IDE. So let's take a quick look at one of these examples. Let's go to the central interface. So this is the live documentation that we have. And as you can see, even on the class level, there's now various code snippets examples showing you how to use the classes. And if you move down to the various methods, like for example, create edge, there's more code snippets showing you how to use the different API calls. And all of this, as I said, is available directly from the IDE if you use the code completion feature. So this actually also already concludes the platform independent features that I wanted to show you today. So if there are any questions up to now, I'm going to I would like to answer them. Let's see, where are those questions? Okay. Let me quickly skim through them. There's one question, which is, when are the releases planned approximately for the other products? So yeah, this is, as I said right now, this is only available for yFiles for HTML, but the other platforms will follow soon. Basically, it's done when it's done, but I expect them to be released in late Q2 this year, or maybe Q3. But so it's just a few more months for you to wait, but it's certainly worth it waiting for it. And one question is about the new analysis API. Do I need to convert my existing code, or does the old approach still work as before? Yes. Also, this is completely new API. The old one is still there and it's working. So this is basically just a convenience wrapper for you that makes it easier to apply the graph algorithms. But if you're, as an existing customer, you're not required to rewrite your code. The old code will work just like as before. But for new code, we recommend using the new API. And there's one last question before we get to yFiles for HTML specifically. Is the new hierarchic bus structure an automatic feature of the hierarchic layout? No, this is not automatic, but as a developer, you need to configure that. So this actually, we think this should not be or cannot be inferred automatically from the algorithm. So if you want to get this bus-like routing, basically from the point of view of the algorithm, you can only get to see the structure of the graph, but you don't get the semantics. So if there's, for example, blue and green nodes and they shouldn't be put into the same bus structure, you need to tell the algorithm which nodes or edges to bundle into bus structures. Well, let's see if I can explain this with some live coding. Actually, this makes for a great transition to yFiles for HTML, because I will use this for as an example. So so the following code is yFiles for HTML, and we're going to play with the layout data. So this is a feature of the hierarchic layout that we have. So let's just increase the size. So this is basically the parameterization of the algorithm happens through the hierarchic layout data, which is accompanied with the hierarchic layout. So there's lots of different options in here. There's hierarchic layout data, and it has this buses property, which is what we're looking for. So there's obviously documentation and even some source code down there. Let's try to come up with a use case. I'm going to iterate over the nodes in my graph, and I'm just interested in those which are leaf nodes. So because those nodes which have an in degree of 1, so there's just one edge going in, so we're checking whether the in degree of that node is 1, and there's no outgoing edge, so we're going to check the out degree of that same node and check whether it's 0. So with this, select 0. So with this, I selected or filtered all the nodes I would like to visualize in the bus. And in the next step, I'm going to come up with multiple groups. So I'm going to group them by just in my example, I used color, but in this case, I'm just going to use something more simple, like just the width. So we are going to group the nodes by their width. So if they have a different width, they will land into a different bus substructure. And let's just put the results, which is the width and the elements. Let's just put them into a temporary object, width and elements. And now with these, we're going to iterate over them, over the groups. So for each group, we're going to configure a bus. So we're going to use the data, use the buses feature, and add a new bus. For this, we need to use the hierarchic layout bus descriptor. Let's import that one, and it's not yet imported. Missing import statement. Yeah, why don't you fix it for me? Import it. Okay, and then we're going to each of these buses. We need to declare in this case, actually the edges which belong to the same bus. So we're going to set the edges to to the group's elements, but since these are all nodes, we are going to map them to their incoming edge, because we know there's one incoming edge for each node. So let's just go to the in edges of that node. So yeah, looks complicated, and just the first one. Now it seems to be happy. So we only choose the nodes that have in degree of 1 and out degree of 0. We group them by width, and then for each one we create a bus and assign all the edges in that group to the bus. Now let's see whether that works. Run the demo, and so it starts over here. And so let's see whether, let's just change the width of this one and add some more over here. And didn't work. What a pity. So the idea would be to see different different buses. Let's see. Where's my code? Over here. Buses at the buses and the source, and then move it. Currently, I don't see what I did wrong. So this is live coding. I'm sorry if I failed. I think this would take too much time now. I'm going to get back and to that question, and we'll send you the corresponding code. And maybe my colleague can check the code that I wrote and see what I did wrong. I'm just going to send that code quickly to my colleague. Where is he? There, maybe they can check it in the meantime so that we can continue. So this is my code. Okay, so next to the yFiles for HTML specific changes. So this applies to the new major release of yFiles for HTML, which was just released last week. And the one thing that really changed the way that people develop with the library is that we changed the way that yFiles for HTML can be bundled in the demo package. So the biggest and most visible change is that yFiles can now be installed as a private NPM dependency. So it's not yet on npmjs.org, but you can push it into your own private repository, or even just use a simple relative path to the place of the package where you have it in your network. So this has many different applications on the usability of the library, and I will show you these in the next slides. Let me point out that the old loading mechanisms that we have still work. So this is just an improvement. It's nothing that you need to change as an existing customer. But as a new customer, you could just create your package JSON using npm or yarn init, and then add a dependency to yFiles, and your IDE and your toolchain should be able to work with that immediately. So this is how it works. As a private npm dependency, you can just add it to your package JSON, and then use the EcmaScript import to import the yFiles functionality into the application. So no more require.js or UMD module loading or CommonJS loading. So this is what most modern developers prefer today, and this is what IDEs today have great support for. As you've seen in the coding example, where you've seen that the automatic import worked and the documentation snippets worked right out of the box without requiring me to do any sophisticated IDE customizations or configurations. With yFiles as a private npm dependency, code completion works out of the box. There's no more manual copying of yFiles and the JavaScript files, and no more awkward configuration of the frameworks in which you want to use yFiles. So you can easily integrate yFiles into your existing application or your new one that you're building just by adding the dependency and then loading it like any other dependency that you may get from npm.js. So things like Webpack, the CLIs, be it Angular CLI, Vue.js CLI, or Create React App, and so on, and all the similar tools that are capable of dealing with npm modules should immediately be able to work with and bundle the yFiles. So due to the many advantages of this new loading mechanisms, we decided to switch the entire package to it. So anything starting from the demos to the documentations and the code snippets has been refactored, and we refactored it so that it's now in line with this recommended way of development. So we are really confident that this EcmaScript 6 imports and the loading and the npm loading is the way to go with today. And even if you're not doing it already, be sure to give it a try. It really makes coding and your code cleaner and nicer to organized. With the IDEs that we recommend, Visual Studio Code and WebStorm, you now get the perfect code completion and the best possible developer experience, and without the manual configuration that you had to do previously. The demo package, as it's a part of the library, also comes with the pre-configured WebStorm or IntelliJ products project files and VS Code configuration. So you just need to open the package in your IDE and you can get started coding immediately. So now I talked a lot about this, so let's just try how this works out. You've seen it already before in the live coding. Let's get back to a simple example. So here it is. So there's just a basic import statement, and the IDE knows whether elements are used or not. So I can use new hierarchic layout because it's already imported over here. But I can also choose one of the other layouts that we have. So let's go with the organic layout. It will automatically add the new import statement. And as soon as it's imported, I also get code completion with the documentation and of course with the various options that are available with the methods and constructors. So this is actually also a new feature that in this release we added. Most of the, in fact, every one of the non-advanced features has been added as an option directly to the constructor, whereas previously you had to do something like instantiate the layout and then use the properties over here to initialize the layout with your preferred options. You can now use the inline setting, and with the enhanced TypeScript definition file, you now also get code completion with the string variants, for example, of the enumeration values. So you can still use the enumeration values, but you can also use the string values, and it will complete the values for you. And if you make a mistake, Topom, it will highlight the error for you immediately. So using the API in a bad way will automatically highlight the problem for you. So let's do false true, and it will tell us that the number of arguments is invalid and will help us how to actually call the method. So this all works out of the box immediately if you're using a node module and a package JSON which references yFiles, because it comes with a pre-configured npm style TypeScript definition file. So you don't need to use TypeScript to get the benefits, but if you're using an IDE like WebStorm or Visual Studio Code, you also get the benefits of code completion directly for JavaScript too. So also a tiny little new feature is that if you open the package, this is the package that you get when you download the bundle. It comes pre-configured with a set of tasks for you to run to open the documentation, to open the README file, and actually to start the bundled demo server, which you actually don't need to execute manually because it will start automatically once you open the product, the project. Okay, next some more non-code specific features, but also specific to yFiles for HTML. It's all about CSS. So we added static CSS classes to all the default templates that we have. For example, the handles, the snap lines, the selection rectangles, the marquee, and so on. Uh, this means that right now you can simply reference a new style sheet in your application and change the look and feel of your diagram without writing a single line of JavaScript code. So it's all just JavaScript. This makes it super easy to include the diagram in a company dashboard where there's a company specific corporate identity or corporate design and company branding. So you can use the colors that your customers would like to use, and it's really, really easy. It's just a line of CSS you need to change. With the CSS extensions, we also added CSS3 animations and transitions to some of the integrated UI elements. That is the most notably the tooltip and the label editing box. So this works similarly to how animations are implemented, for example, in Vue.js, and is very easy to customize. So it's just these 3-4 lines of CSS code that you can use to get these, well, in this case, ugly effects. So I'm sure you're not going to use that rotation animations, and it's not part of the package, just for illustrational purposes, of course. On to the next one. There's more WebGL rendering options that we have with this release. So for the visualization of the handles and for the overview, which is kind of like the bird's eye view of the graph, and also for the grid background, the built-in one, we now have a simple property render mode that you can set to WebGL, Canvas, or SVG in case you would want to switch from the default SVG rendering. It's for those very huge graphs that you might have where you need that last bit of performance boost in order to actually render like tens of thousands of handles like in this visualization. You probably won't need it, but it's good to know that it's at your disposal, just a line of code away. We also enhanced the collection API. So as a developer, you have access to the elements in a graph, and actually I tried to use this API before in the code snippet I wrote. So for example, all the nodes, the edges, the labels, and incoming edges, outgoing edges, and so on, these all implement the enumerable interface, which is similar to the iterable interface, and actually implements the HTML iterable interface. So you can always write for let variable of graph component graph nodes, and it will be iterable. It just adds more convenience methods which provide commonly required functionality, like adding more elements, different reduction flat map variants, ordering elements by a certain key, grouping them like I did or tried to do with the width of the elements, finding distinct set of elements, and so on. So I've used this in the Q&A before. I'll just skip the details here. And we also made our collections feel more like the built-in JavaScript API by adding those methods that you may know from the JavaScript array method already. So if you were missing those push, pop, slice, splice, shift, unshift, and fill methods, there you are. They are now available on our list implementation too, with all the goodies that we have above here. So every list, of course, also is enumerable and has all these functionality. And with the release, in those places in the API where we previously required an IEnumerable or an IList or a list or a custom types, you can always just use a plain JavaScript array or JavaScript iterable object or a generator function, for example. So they are automatically converted to these type these types internally. So if you don't, you're not even required to create these elements. They're just available for you as a convenience API. That's it already for the yFiles for HTML specific improvements. And let's see whether there's questions here. One question is, are there any new demos with a 2.2 release? Yes, we added more demos. Let's go. This is the demo page. No, it's not the one. If you go to live.yworks.com, you get to see the demos that we have in the package. These are the demos that are part of the package right now. And there's a neat trick I can do, v2.2, and see what demos have been added in the 2.2 release. And these are the ones. So there is a new demo which shows how to use the family tree layout, the CSS styling that I pointed you to, the various overview styling, how to actually use D3.js for the visualization inside a node, how to configure the partition grid, how to use rollup.js, how to use the layout data and the new analysis algorithms API, and some more smaller features over here too. So it's a few larger demos and a few smaller ones. Be sure to check out the application features. They don't look great, but there's a lot of value in there for you to enhance your application. So these we rewrote almost every demo in the package to make the code more reusable. So if you take a look at the source code of these demos, you will see that there's a snippet or a class or a file that you can just drop into your own applications and add that functionality to your own app. So lots of new stuff in there. Be sure to check it out. Of course, we also updated the Angular specific integration demo, the React demo, the Vue and the Webpack demos. They have been updated to make use of the new NPM packaging feature to show the ease of the configuration. And does the 2.2 evaluation package also work offline? Yeah, there's no internet connection required. It's all self-contained, except for the demos that use the external toolkits like Angular. They need to be downloaded or npm installed once. In fact, yFiles itself, or yFiles for HTML, can be run from the file system. However, the demos in this case, require the demo server because of the symbolic imports. So this is, as you can see, it says import graph component from yFiles. And this can't be executed natively by the browser yet, because the browser has no support for symbolic imports. They are working on the standardization of this feature. What the browser actually can do is, if you provide the full path and add a .js to these extensions, it will be able to load the files unchanged. So there's no need to bubble or webpack the applications. They would work right out of the box with this little change over here. However, as you can see, once I do that change, the code completion doesn't work as well anymore. And this is both the case with Visual Studio Code and the JetBrains IDEs. We were working with the team with those IDE vendors together, but in the end result was basically that right now, using the common way of programming JavaScript libraries, of creating JavaScript libraries, and using symbolic names is the only one which is really supported thoroughly through all the IDEs. So we decided to stick with that one. And the small demo server that we have basically just well, let's see that. We can see that actually at runtime. It basically only rewrites that top line of the file. So this is what the demo server does. It changes the import statement, and instead of importing from yFiles, it actually imports directly from the specific JS files. But apart from that, the rest of the file remains unchanged. So you can start adding and coding or changing the code inside here, and you don't need source maps and so on. Of course, source maps work if you're using Webpack. That's fine. But this tiny demo server that we have right here makes it easy to do fast round trips. So this loads within a split second. So there's no complicated startup of a development server or stuff. It will just on the fly replace the import statements, which is, well, happens within milliseconds basically. And yeah, so is there a recommendation on the usage of WebGL? Because we now have them for the handles. Yeah, do we still, I think it says a lot that we only added that feature right now in this release. The SVG implementation that we had before actually performed really well, or well enough for the vast majority of use cases. I can't really remember someone complaining about the performance, because it only starts to break down for like 50,000 nodes, and who wants to select and actually resize 50,000 nodes at the same time? So that's a very unlikely use case. So my recommendation actually would be keep it simple, and only if you know that you require that extra tiny bit of performance, if you know that there's a bottleneck in the rendering performance and you don't get that 60 frames per second, then maybe consider switching to WebGL, because you still need to check whether the browser actually supports WebGL. It's just a single line of code basically, but it's still another branch that you might need to support and test. And as you know, Internet Explorer doesn't support, at least the old versions don't support WebGL, so you can't just unconditionally turn that on. And on some very slow mobile devices, it might even perform worse than SVG on the older implementations, at least. So give it a try if you feel that it will improve the situation, but it's actually not that likely in my humble opinion. Okay, there's another questions. We provided the license previously in UMD format. Do you plan to provide the license in ES module format? Good question. Yeah, that's actually, yeah, that's one of the changes that we did. Basically, oh, we can see that over here. Basically, the license in yFiles is just JSON data, or it's just a JavaScript object, basically a collections of keys and values. So, and the one thing that as a developer you need to do is assign those values to this object's property, license.value. Previously we had the license in the bundle as an UMD file. I think there's a knowledge base article. Let's check that. So I think it's license. So knowledge base. Wait, yeah, this one. So previously the license looked like this. There was a file which had a JS extension, and it had this UMD header that you may know, so that it works with require.js and so on. Basically what it did, it just had the JSON values, and it assigned them to some public property. And if you loaded that file as a script tag, yFiles later on just picked up that data for you. But it was never actually required to do it that way. You could just as well execute that line of code, or those lines of code, directly in your application code and embed this into the application, which would remove yet another file from your deployment. And with the new version, the license actually comes as a JSON file, so it's just the data. And in the demos, we load the JSON in this call below here from the file, which just does a regular HTTP fetch, and then passes that value to the run function, which basically assigns this. So the best option, or one of the best options you have, is simply paste your license data in here, like just like I did over here, like we have it over here. Just put that one over here. This makes it very concise. Although, of course, it adds the license to your source code, which you might not want to do, because you might want to add the license during your deployment step. So if you prefer this option, if you prefer not to put the JSON inside the source code or inside the true source code, load it at runtime, or maybe load it via Webpack, and then assign it to the value property of the license object. So that's just the yFiles object, and it expects to get the JSON data. So to answer your questions, we are not going to provide it in UMD format, but if you want to still have it in UMD format, just take the contents of the JSON file and paste it in this location of the old file, and then you have the old file, and this still works. So the only thing that changes is the way that we by default load the license in the demos, and probably how you will receive the license data from the sales team. I'm not exactly sure, to be honest, whether they will provide you with all the variants, but probably they will just go for the JSON format. So you will receive a JSON file, which you can just paste into your application or into the old UMD file. Okay, one last thing. My colleague actually, did he get the time to look at my mistake previously? Because these are all the questions. Let's just check this out. So there was one. Do I understand the comment? Add group elements. I see the mistake. That's evil. So I only want to use I want to map the nodes to the first in edge instead of oh, it should be the same. Should be the same, because if I map them, let's see whether that changes something. If not, I'm going to have to do overtime. Other than that's it. Let's see if that works. So I'm grouping by width and start with a small graph so that you can see. So let's start with several one of these. No, didn't work. So what a pity. So we're going to filter all the nodes that have in degree of 1 and an out degree 0, grouping them by width, creating elements, and group elements. It's there. We map the elements, which are all nodes, to the first in edge. What's the problem? Let's see what my colleague had in there. He said this one should work better. Actually, I don't see the difference. And this is one last try. Maybe I have. Oh, I'm not in development mode. I need to reload. Let's see whether that changes the thing. I had my developer tools open and I had the old results in the cache. So what a stupid mistake. So this looks more like it. So one more try and then we're done. So a group of nodes of that size and another group of nodes of this size. Should be a different one, I guess. And let's see. Yeah, now we have two buses, one over here for the nodes with that width, and for the wide nodes over here. I'm so sorry that I tripped over this stupid mistake. I was just not running the code. Okay, so lesson learned for me. But now, finally, that's it. Thank you very much for attending. If there's any more questions left, be sure to drop us a note, send us feedback via the email, or if you want to, use the social media. And I hope you enjoy it, and see you next time. That's it. Happy diagramming. Bye-bye.